Preparation for this series, I asked people to share their questions about healing. And over the next few weeks, we're going to look at as many of them as I can. Before we start, though, I want to make a couple things clear. First, there's no way I can answer every question. There are 50 or 60 different questions. Second, I don't have all the answers. There's some things I don't understand either. Over 20 years ago, when I became pastor, I felt a pressure to know everything. I always had an answer for you. Now I realize just how much I don't know. I am not the fount of all knowledge. I'm still on the learning journey and will be till I die. So when I don't know, rather than bluff or fake it, I will say, I don't know. And we will learn to trust God together. I'm also not under the illusion every answer will be popular or that you will unanimously agree. I'm going to answer from the Bible, but not everybody likes that. So before we start, let's concede that none of us have all the answers. We have thoughts, ideas, beliefs, convictions, but we are not God. When you disagree with me, I ask for grace and patience. If you disagree with someone else, offer that same grace. We can have healthy conversations about faith, learn from each other, and grow together. Okay, everybody understand the ground rules? All right, thank you. So let's get started. First question, how should I pray for people to be healed? Do we ask for healing, or do we in the believer's authority speak healing, rebuke illness, etc.? That's always confused me. Well, we're Americans, and we like predictable formulas. We like, if you do this, you get this. Save 15% of your income, have more than enough for retirement. Buy a house, sell it in 5 years for more than you paid. Get an entry-level job, work hard, be loyal to the company, and you'll work your way to the top. Find the right person, date them a while, get married, live happily ever after. Read all the parenting books. Send your kids to the best schools. Make sure they know the best stuff, and they will grow into young model citizens. Wear the right clothes, drive the right car, move to the right neighborhood, and you'll be accepted by all the right people. Take care of yourself, eat right, exercise, sleep well, and you will live a long, happy life, and one day die in your sleep and instantly be in the presence of Jesus. We want everything nice, neat, predictable, and packaged. If you make the right decision, you get right results. If you make the wrong decision, then you get what you deserve. Our thought is the formula works if you work it. And then life happens. You get sick and don't have answers. Once again, people try to make that your fault because you didn't follow the right formula. If you haven't been healed, it's because you don't have enough faith. If you haven't received a financial miracle, it's because you haven't given enough or done enough to qualify. If you are sick, it must be your fault. You need to examine your life. You must be doing something wrong. What have you done? What have you said? Say you're healed, you'll be healed. Don't admit you're sick and you won't be sick. Just have more faith. Is that really true? Can you confess your way into or out of a healing? We've been taught to think that it's a formula. If you can go to the right faith healer, say the right prayer, give the right offering, go to the right church, or have the right amount of faith, if you can figure out the formula and do everything exactly right, then God will heal you. And in some cases, even God has to heal you. I even read a book that taught the right way to pray for sicknesses, where to place your hands and what you have to say. And according to the book, if you don't pray the right way, you won't be healed. And I just imagine God in heaven going, oh, I wanted so much to heal you of that headache, but your hand was just 3 inches the wrong place. And you just get that right. We're Americans. We like methods and formulas. We want to believe if we say the right thing, pray the right prayer, or push the right button, the healing is automatic. But there's no one scriptural method for healing. So just to illustrate that, I want to look with you at a few of the miracles of Jesus. When Lazarus died, Jesus waited 4 days, then called him out of the grave. But then on another occasion, in a town called Nain, Jesus was walking, and there was a funeral procession, and a widow had lost her son. And Jesus walked up to the body and said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." And he did. In Luke 17, 10 men with leprosy yelled to Jesus, "Jesus, have pity on us." And when they saw him, he said, "Go show yourself to the priests." As they went, they were cleansed. But then in Mark chapter 1, Jesus did it different. A man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you're willing, you can make him clean." This time, Jesus broke all convention and all rules and touched him, and he was cured. In John 9, Jesus made mud balls and put them on the eyes of a blind man. And when he washed them off, he could see. Are you getting the picture? There's not one formula or one method. There's not something specific you have to do or special you have to say in order to qualify for healing. It's not about finding a prayer expert or being in the right place. Your healing is not based on what you do. It's based on what God does, on his word, on his promises. You can't restrict Jesus to your system or preference. You can't decide, you don't get to decide who's qualified for a miracle and who isn't. You can't dictate how. You cannot put God in your little box. The principles are consistent. The message is unchanging, but the methods change all the time. The way people pray or speak or rebuke or claim is based on how they were taught, what they experienced, or their tradition. But Jesus used different methods for different people with different needs. The frantic and sometimes foolish searching for the right formula, the attempts at bargaining with God or buttering up for a miracle should remind us of one very sobering fact. People all around us are suffering, hurting, and in desperate need of a touch from Jesus. Next question. When it comes to healing, how much is up to me and how much is up to God? It's a big theological question. In response to that, we're going to look at two men in the New Testament, each in a desperate situation. Their only hope was a miracle from Jesus. And by studying their stories and Jesus' reactions side by side, you'll discover some important things about miracles. I hope relieve some pressure. And along the way, I'm going to answer a bunch of your different questions. Mark chapter 10 tells the story of Bartimaeus, a blind man, desperate to see. John chapter 5, students, that's been in your reading as you're reading through the book of John. We find the story of an invalid, a man who couldn't move and was desperate to walk. Both men had a need. Now, it's important to understand the culture in Bible times. Because these two guys were handicapped, they were seen as a worthless drain on society. People avoided and ignored the handicapped or disabled. It was an ugly, deep-seated prejudice. And they believed that the reason the invalid couldn't walk and the reason Bartimaeus couldn't see was because they had sinned or their parents had sinned. Their disability was viewed as their fault. Both men had a need. Both men also had a plan. Bartimaeus' plan was simple. When Jesus came by, Bartimaeus planned to yell out and ask him for healing. The invalid had a little more complex plan. He stayed at a pool, the pool of Bethesda, that was a crowded gathering place for the sick. And it was believed that when an angel came and stirred the water, that the first person to get in the water would be healed. And so when the water began to move in a mysterious way, could have been an angel, might have been the wind, there was a race to the pool. And the invalid's plan was to jump in the pool at the first ripple. There was just one slight flaw in his plan. He couldn't walk. He couldn't run to the pool. He couldn't jump in the water. So really, it wasn't much of a plan. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. Bartimaeus couldn't get a job, but he had some initiative. Every day he got up early, he went out, he got a good spot on the side of the road, and spent the day begging, hoping that someone, anyone, would have pity on him and would put a few coins in his cup. It wasn't much, but at least Bartimaeus was doing something. The invalid, on the other hand, was doing absolutely nothing. He's lying on a mat by the pool day after day. He couldn't get up and run. He couldn't jump in the water. He's the picture of self-pity. I can't walk. I can't run. I'm just going to lay here till I die. Bartimaeus was doing everything he could. The invalid was doing absolutely nothing. So who are you like? Are you doing everything you know to do? Or are you like the invalid, just laying around and waiting on your lucky break? Have you ever heard the verse, God helps those who help themselves? Isn't that an awesome Bible verse? It's not in the Bible. And it's only partly true. God does help those who help themselves. God also helps those who don't help themselves. When Bartimaeus heard it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus always drew a crowd. This was a chance for a beggar to make some serious money. Bartimaeus, if he's thinking about his job, should be walking around and trying to work that crowd. Instead, he was completely focused on Jesus. He just kept yelling, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And many people rebuked him, told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Bartimaeus didn't worry about the crowd trying to make him be quiet. He ignored the obstacles, and he kept his focus on Jesus. The invalid did the opposite. When Jesus saw him lying there, learned he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, do you want to get well? And the invalid is the biblical equivalent of Eeyore. Okay? You know, did you grow up with Winnie the Pooh? And Eeyore is the sad, what kind of animal is Eeyore? Donkey that just always is sad like this. That's the invalid. Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water's stirred. When I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. The invalid didn't even recognize Jesus. He just started with all his excuses why he couldn't get better. Someone was always faster. No one was there to throw him in the water. His world was confined to a tiny mat on the stones beside the pool. Bartimaeus was Jesus-focused. The invalid was excuse-focused. So which are you? Are you focused on Jesus? Are you focused on all the excuses, all the things, all the problems, everything that's wrong? When Jesus heard Bartimaeus yelling, he stopped and said, call him. So they called to the blind man, cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. And Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? No hesitation. He had his answer ready. Bartimaeus said, Rabbi, I want to see. He was full of hope. When Jesus asked what he wanted, Bartimaeus could have said, I need a lot of money. He could have asked for a better begging spot. He could have asked for a new job. He could have asked Jesus to endorse his begging. Instead, Bartimaeus went for the whole deal. I want to see. When Jesus asked the invalid, do you want to get well? Sir, I have no one to help me in the pool when the water's stirred. Someone always gets there ahead of me. I'm always in second place. It's just no use. For almost 4 decades, he'd seen through the eyes of hopelessness, waiting for a healing that didn't come. He no longer believed that it was possible. He was an excuse-making, no-chance-taking, hopeless, helpless case. What a big difference. Bartimaeus was hopeful. The invalid was hopeless. So who are you like? Are you filled with hope? Or have you given up on your miracle? Jesus called Bartimaeus. When he did, throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and he came to Jesus. When Jesus called, Bartimaeus followed the sound of his voice and he pressed through the crowd to Jesus. The invalid, on the other hand, couldn't come to Jesus. He wasn't physically able. He wasn't able to approach Jesus, so Jesus approached him. What a difference. Bartimaeus came to Jesus. Jesus came to the invalid. And in spite of all their differences, both men had an encounter with Jesus. Jesus stopped for both of them. He stopped for Bartimaeus, who had no hope, and for the invalid, the Bartimaeus who was filled with hope, and the invalid who had none. The blind man shouted, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And when Jesus asked Bartimaeus, "What do you want?" the reply was, "I want to see." It's very significant that Bartimaeus called Jesus Son of David. Apparently, Bartimaeus knew who Jesus was, because Son of David was a term that meant Messiah. Jesus had taught around the area where Bartimaeus lived, and on one of those occasions, Bartimaeus must have been on the edge of the crowd and heard life-giving words. Perhaps because he was blind, he listened better than other people, and apparently, Bartimaeus made the decision that Jesus was more than a man, that he was the Messiah, that he was the Son of God. Bartimaeus was a faith-filled believer. The invalid wasn't a believer, a follower, or even a casual observer. Jesus was the most famous teacher of the day. He attracted attention. He inspired controversy everywhere he went. But this guy sitting by the pool had never heard of Jesus. He just called him Sir. Imagine all those sick people sitting around a pool waiting for healing, not knowing that the healer himself was on the scene. The invalid couldn't have been a believer, or he would have known who Jesus was. So, if he was not a believer, then there's no way he could be healed, right? If he didn't believe in Jesus, how could he do his part? If he didn't believe in Jesus, how much faith did he have? What a huge difference. Bartimaeus was a believer. The invalid didn't even ask who Jesus was. Jesus said to Bartimaeus, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." No hesitation, no doubt. I want to see. When Jesus came to him, Bartimaeus was ready to receive. He knew what he wanted, healing. The invalid didn't even know what he needed. When Jesus asked, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir, no one will help me in the pool. When I'm trying to get in, I never get there in time. Somebody always beats me. 38 years, been doing the same thing. Loser every time." The invalid didn't ask to be healed. He was just looking for someone committed enough to stay with him, and when the water stirred, to chunk him in the water, which, by the way, wouldn't have worked very well. The invalid was looking for natural answers when the supernatural answer was right in front of him. And comparing their stories, you root for Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus deserved to be healed. And you're kind of apathetic towards the invalid. What did he deserve? Now, for some of you, everything you believe about healing and miracles is about to be challenged. So stay with me. Remember, I'm just reading these stories straight from the Bible. Look what happened next. First, Bartimaeus. He said, "I want to see." "Go," said Jesus. "Your faith has healed you." Bartimaeus was healed because of his faith. So that must be the key. That must be the secret. If you want to be healed, you have to have great faith, or at least faith as much as Bartimaeus. So there is a formula. It's up to you. God does help those who help themselves. But now the invalid. Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." And in like the ultimate Bible understatement, All it says is, at once, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. I want a little bit more detail than that, because I want to know what the people around him did. I want to know what he did. But wait a second. If faith is the key, why was the invalid healed? He didn't have any faith. He didn't even know who Jesus was. Nothing he did brought about his healing. In fact, when Jesus offered healing, he just wanted somebody to throw him in the water. I'm surprised he didn't say to Jesus, it's all right. I'll just stay here. I got a good spot. I'm good. Bartimaeus was healed because of his faith. The invalid wasn't healed because of his faith. He was healed because of Jesus' compassion. Jesus said to Bartimaeus, go, your faith has healed you. Bartimaeus was a believer before being healed. His faith was the key to his healing. The invalid was not a believer at all. In fact, he didn't become a believer until sometime after his healing. His faith came as a result of his miracle. So some of you, this is going to mess with your theology. If you've always believed that healing was the result of faith, how do you explain this? There's only one possible explanation: the love of God. God, in his love and mercy, chose to reveal himself to the invalid by healing his sickness. In just a few minutes, we're going to pray. And if you are not a follower of Jesus, if you're a skeptical doubter, I dare you to pray for healing. Both these men had an encounter with Jesus. Surprisingly, both of them received a miracle. Bartimaeus was healed because of his faith in Jesus. The invalid had faith in Jesus because he was healed. See, I think of people who struggle with depression. If you're struggling with depression, it's really rare to find somebody deep in depression who also has a lot of faith. Thank God it's not about you. It's not about what you say, what you pray, what you do. He's God, you're not. Now let me caution you with a balance point. You could listen to this point and you could say, Pastor Rod doesn't believe in faith. He doesn't think faith makes a difference. If you say that, you are twisting my words and you are a liar who misrepresents the truth. I am faith-filled. I believe in an all-powerful God who can do exceedingly beyond all we ask or imagine. And Scripture is clear. Faith is necessary for a follower of Jesus. Hebrews 11 says, without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. I believe in faith. At the same time, I'm thankful that when my faith is weak, God can still heal. Amen. His miracle power is unlimited. It can't be limited by you. What happens next is incredible. Bartimaeus did what you would expect. He left his beggar tools behind and he followed Jesus. But look what happened with the invalid. This is nuts. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who'd been healed, it's the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. You're working. And he replied, the man who made me well said, pick up your mat and walk. So they asked him, who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk? The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus has slipped away into the crowd that was there. What? I can't imagine. Put yourself in the invalid's place. You're crippled and you can't walk. You've lost all hope. You never have a chance to walk again. Then one day a man walks up and heals you. Would you lose track of that guy in the crowd? No. I don't think so. You would grab onto Jesus with everything you had, determined to follow him forever. But not this guy. Many people, even though they've been touched by God, they've experienced his love and they've experienced his power, lose sight of him in their crowded, busy life, just like the invalid. The invalid said, I don't know where he went. And so at that moment, boom, God struck him again, and he fell down, and he was crippled the rest of his life. That's what should happen, right? But not Jesus. Jesus, the Son of God, filled with incredible love, went looking for the invalid. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said, "See, you're well again. Stop sinning, or something worse can happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews, "Jesus made me well." Jesus is not just concerned with his physical condition, but also with his spiritual condition. Jesus' point was, sin has consequences far worse than sickness. 38 years as an invalid was nothing compared to an eternity in hell. Both Bartimaeus and the invalid had opportunity to follow Jesus. Bartimaeus chose to follow, and we really don't know what decision the invalid made. It appears he also became a follower because he returned to the Jews and proclaimed that Jesus had healed him. So who does God help? Back to your question. Two categories of people. God helps those who help themselves, like Bartimaeus. God also helps those who can't help themselves, like the invalid. See, it's not about you. It's about him. It's not about the words you say, the faith you feel, or the things you do. That's all wonderful and good. I'm for faith, but it's not about you. It's not about finding the formula. It's about finding Jesus who loves you beyond all love. The lesson from Bartimaeus is run to Jesus. People may try to discourage you. It may seem like there's no hope, but run to Jesus. When hope is gone, when doctors don't have the answer, when you don't know where to turn, run to Jesus. Don't let anything stop you. The invalid, 38 years had passed. He was convinced things would never be better. The invalid didn't deserve to be healed. He didn't exhibit any faith to warrant a response from Jesus. He didn't even know who Jesus was. In his case, rather than help those who help themselves, Jesus helped a helpless man. When everything around you fails, when your friend or family aren't around to give you what you need, when your cries for help and your prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling, God's mercy steps in. Mercy is God's response to misery. Maybe you feel like you've been abandoned. You've tried everything you can think of and nothing has worked. You're a perfect candidate for the mercy of God. When you're helpless and hopeless, God reaches out in mercy. The lesson from the invalid is mercy is available to you. Jesus didn't walk up to him and say, "You're going to be healed whether you like it or not." Jesus didn't force it. Jesus simply said, "Do you want to be made well?" God never forces mercy on you. It must be received. You can receive a miracle if you've got a lot of faith, a little faith, or no faith at all.